So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Adara Goldberg, and I'm the director of the Holocaust Resource Center here at Kean University. For those of you who are unfamiliar with our work, we were founded in 1982 by Holocaust survivors who settled in the Elizabeth neighborhood. And they worked with the public university to ensure that there would always be a space for learning about the Holocaust and its lessons. And we are very proud that nearly 40 years later, we work with more than 130 school districts throughout the state of New Jersey. We have a robust collection of more than 8,500 print texts and more than 200 original Holocaust survivor and liberator testimonies. And so we are very proud of the work that we're doing. And a big part of our work centers around commemorations. And again, ensuring that we are presenting programming that is accessible for the community at large. And that brings us to today's program. Today's program is being presented in recognition of Kristallnacht, or the November pogrom. And it is being co-presented by our friends at the Center for International Studies here at Kean. The program will go as followed. I'm going to introduce the moderator for the program, who's going to provide some context on Kristallnacht and make connections to our site of interest today, which is Gdansk or Danzig, depending on where you are from and when you know the name from. She will then introduce our speaker, who is our published poet and musician, who will be able to share more insight into their work. And so to begin, anyone who has questions, I'm going to ask that you put them into the chat box, and we will be sure to answer them at the end of the program. Dr. Joanna Sliwa is a historian at the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, known as the Claims Conference. Her own research focuses on the Holocaust in Poland and on Polish Jewish history. Dr. Sliwa has worked as an educator, a researcher, a translator, and a consultant on myriad projects. Her first award-winning book, Jewish Childhood in Krakow, A Microhistory of the Holocaust, was published this year by Rutgers University Press. And as you have seen in the reminder email for today's program, there was a discount code if you order it now from the publisher. So I strongly encourage everybody to order her book. This received the 2020 Ernest Frankel Prize from the Wiener Holocaust Library in the UK. And one of her current projects is a new book entitled Counterfeits Countess, the Jewish mathematician who rescued Poles during the Holocaust, which is co-authored by Dr. Elizabeth Barry White. And I will now turn things over to my friend and colleague, Dr. Sliwa.
Thank you so much, Adara, for this generous introduction. Thank you for the invitation to today's commemorative program. Thank you to all of you here. I understand you had many choices of various programs, and you chose to be here with us today. So thank you so much. And I see many familiar faces of friends, colleagues, and thank you so much for joining us. So it is now my pleasure to introduce Grzegorz Kwiatkowski. Grzegorz is the author of several volumes of poetry. He is an accomplished musician and member of a Polish psychedelic rock band, Trupa Trupa. His work explores the topics of history, memory, and ethics. Grzegorz served as an artist in residence at international literary programs and as a guest lecturer in a long list of places, and I will only mention some of them: the University of California at Berkeley, Johns Hopkins University, the University of Chicago, and Jewish Theological Seminary. His writings have been published and reviewed in many prestigious outlets. He performed with his band at numerous festivals around the world and at concerts. So the way that we will proceed is Grzegorz and I will begin with reading from Grzegorz' most recent volume called Crops, which was released just days ago. The poems were translated from the Polish by Peter Konstantin. I will then lead a conversation with Grzegorz. However, as we are speaking, as we're reading, as we're speaking, I encourage all of you to pose questions for Grzegorz by using the Q&A function. We will address as many of those questions as we can toward the end of the program. So now I will begin with the poem that opens Grzegorz's new book. And the title is Burning. Where are Isaac, Moshe, Vefa? They are all asleep here beneath the soil. Where are Rahela, Stefan, Alexander? They are all asleep beneath the soil in Stawisky, in Tykocin, in Radziłów, in Czyżew, in Drohicin, in Jedwabne. He had butchered 18 Jews, he told me this in my apartment as he installed my stove. And the sun still shines upon his house and the generations of his family. You raped a Jewess behind the mill, and then you slashed her throat. In the village, he is greatly respected, despite being a bachelor, despite being decrepit. And to this day, a sign hangs on his door: Jews, gypsies, and devils not welcome. He hit a child with an iron rod, brains splattering upon his clothes, and made its mother clean the mess. He worked in the fields, toiling late into the night. He was kind to his dying mother. Let us judge him not in his hour of need. They began beating her, turning her white body black. There was so much chaos in those days. Such everyday misdemeanors and transgressions might now seem something special. O Lord, thou pickest us from their hands, burning, burning in the barn, burning.
And I will read off. Firstly, I would like to say hello to all of you, and I'm happy that there are so many of us here, and it's a great honor to be guest of especially on this very important and in some way tragic day. And you just heard the poem from the Crops book, very tragic poem, I guess the most tragic poem from this book. So yeah, but in some way I think that by facing this tragic, horrible events from the past, we can change a bit our reality for a better. So I will read another 4 much more shorter but still tragic poems from these Crops books. Crops. Our real work is farm work, not killing, although I admit the massacres in the swamps have the rhythm of our seasonal labor, and when the rains were heavy, we did not go out for crops. Graves. Corpses were thrown into the well, buried in pits, dugouts, in horses' graves, and then the children pulled them out from the well, from the pits, from the dugouts, and from the horses' graves. Ranger dance. During the war, we laid out bodies like wood, but after the war, we laid out wood in the forest like bodies freshly felled. World. I went with my child to the forest and cried helplessly with him. Tears dripped from my eyes, and the child wiped them away with his hand, and I so regretted that I had brought him into the world.
Thank you so much, Grzegorz, for sharing your poems with us. Grzegorz, you are from Gdańsk, which is in today's Poland, and I hope everyone can see the slide. Yes?
Yes.
Great, okay, just making sure. I would like to briefly sketch the history of Gdańsk for our audience. Before World War II, Gdańsk was known as the Free City of Danzig. In 1933, the Nazis came to power. And that spelled the end of the 6,000-member Jewish community in the city. On this slide, you see just one Danzig Jewish family, the Astrahans. And you may learn about their fates by scanning the QR code on this slide that will take you to a website that includes more information about this family, what these individual family members endured, and to some more resources about Gdańsk and its history. Kristallnacht, the German-perpetrated pogrom against Jews, also reached Danzig, but a few days later than elsewhere in Greater Germany. The violence against Jews and destruction of Jewish-owned property peaked in Danzig on November 12 to 13, 1938. And on this slide here, you see the only surviving synagogue in at that time Danzig, that today serves as a synagogue for the Jewish community of Gdańsk. After the pogrom, Jews prepared for flight from Danzig. The community archive was shipped to Jerusalem, and Judaica arrived in New York. And those items, the Judaica items, you may now see on view at the Jewish Museum in New York, where they are stored. The Jewish community in Danzig organized 4 kinder transports to bring 130 Jewish children to England between May and July 1939. And here you see just one boy, Frank Meisler, here pictured with his mother Meta. Frank was a teenager when 14 years old, when he fled on a kinder transport to England, and that's how he survived the Holocaust. After the war, Frank became a sculptor, and so you may have seen his sculptures. You see an example of it on the top of the slide, commemorating the kinder transports. And this sculpture is from the main railway station in Gdańsk. By September 1st, 1939, Danzig became part of Germany. Many of the 1,400 remaining Jews were forced into the ghetto in the city. Most of these Jews were later deported to camps. And one camp at Stutthof was located about 21 miles from Danzig. After the war, Danzig became part of Poland and was renamed Gdańsk. Most of the about 1,000 Jewish survivors eventually left Gdańsk. They emigrated elsewhere. And it was only after 1989 that a small Jewish community re-emerged in Gdańsk. And so, Grzegorz, my first question to you is, how did this history of Gdańsk, where you grew up and where you live, shape your identity and your artistic work?
So, but by the way, the synagogue, this only synagogue that survived this building is still here in Gdańsk, Brzeszczyn, and my band Trupa, thanks to Jewish community, we were recording there one of our albums many years ago. It was, I don't know, 10 years ago, but they just let us in for kind of 6 months. So it was amazing gift from Jewish community of Gdańsk, and it's a really amazing place. You should visit this place once you will be here, and please feel invited and be my guest. But yeah, Gdańsk is very fascinating city and very tragic city and very complicated city, and we've got a mix of many things in one city. So this city created me as an artist, as a human being, and of course most important was my family history. So my grandfather was a prisoner of a concentration camp Stutthof, and his sister was a prisoner of concentration camp Stutthof. So she was, after the war, mentally ill. He was, after this bloody experience, he was a broken person. Then my father was not so broken, but still not so open. And I am the third generation who is most spoiled in some way and most open. And I'm trying to say about history of my family, about history of my city, about myself really. And I'm trying to understand the reality by tragic history. And in Gdańsk, the Second World War started, so it's also a very symbolical place. The Stutthof concentration camp was closed. On the other hand, this is a post-German city. Arthur Schopenhauer was born in Gdańsk, or Josef Eichendorff was living for some time in Gdańsk. So this is very, and what is very important for me is the solidarity movement that was established in Gdańsk, and Lech Wałęsa is from Gdańsk. So Gdańsk had very tragic history, but on the other hand, Gdańsk had also very great history and great impact. So solidarity movement in some way crushed the communism system in the Europe, and it was all born in Gdańsk here. So I think this is very special and unique city. But in the past, I didn't think about my city in such special way. Maybe I was more narcissistic or more focused on myself. But a few years ago, very tragic event happened in Gdańsk. Very not good word. Very tragic story. That the mayor of Gdańsk, Paweł Adamowicz, was murdered, was stabbed on the charity event. So it was big shock for people from Gdańsk, but I guess for many people in Poland. And he was assassinated by a person who was, in my opinion, affected by a hate speech, which was spread all around person of the murdered president by the Polish media, national media. And so for me, it was kind of a wake-up situation. For me, it was a moral awakening that I am also part of a modern history, and this this spread of hatred is bigger and bigger. And of course, it was also a time when, for example, in America, Donald Trump was into power, and there was also the beginning of Brexit movement, etc. So some dark clouds, in my opinion, of course. I don't know if you've got the same opinion, but it was darker and darker, and in some way, I woke up because of this darker and darker atmosphere. And then I tried to search for some good solutions and for some positive aspects, and for some, I tried to find a way how to change the situation for a bit better. And then I thought about the way of communication, about talking and spreading anti-hate message.
Thank you. So So clearly your influence in your personal identity and also your work as an artist, as a poet, musician, you're influenced by this history, tragic history, but also very rich history of Gdańsk, multicultural history, multilingual history too. And so you sing in English, right? You don't sing in Polish, right? Trupa Trupa sings in English. But the name of your band is in Polish, and it has a dual meaning. So can you please tell us more about what inspired you to form the group, and what prompted you and the members of Trupa Trupa to confront issues such as Holocaust denial, human rights violations, hate speech, populism? You spoke a little bit already about this, what some of the events that prompted you to engage with that, but maybe you can speak a little bit more about why these particular issues are of the most interest to you and to Trupa Trupa.
It's a bit more complicated. Trupa Trupa it means, maybe it means nothing, maybe it means dead body, or maybe it means theatrical troupe. In some way, it doesn't matter. It's just a language game, but and everyone can make everything with this name, and that's also the point of the band, in the way that this is a democratic band with a democratic structure, which is really, really rare in the rock and roll world. There is no one frontman and one leader and one vision. So we've got many visions. We've got many. We are open on many interpretations. And of course, my interpretation and my impact is, this is my story, and I see things through myself and through my family story. And so I read these songs through my family history, and I speak about it. And, and my friends sometimes agree, and sometimes they think about the other interpretation, but it's all good because in some way we are strong because of this democratic multi-voice situation. And but sometimes we are making direct comments. For example, when I'm singing a song called Never Forget, which is inspired inspired by Shoah, by Claude Lanzmann. But we were doing it for many years, but this tragic situation that changed my way of protest was this tragic story of murdering of our president, and a few moments later we went to Texas on South by Southwest Festival in Austin, and I guess I didn't even ask my band if I can do it, because it was really from my heart, and it wasn't planned, but I dedicated this gig to the memory of murdered president, and it was kind of an anti-hate speech concert and message, and actually it was a really, really powerful artistic statement after all. And it's not my opinion, of course. I thought it was powerful, but it was in some objective way very powerful. And then I thought, all right, I can do it in the way that I can't be afraid of protesting in some way with my art, and I'm doing it. But as I said earlier, I'm doing it through myself and through my family history. So I'm not very good in making rapid actions for some topic. For example, now in the Poland on the eastern border, we've got, there is one big horror. People are dying and children are dying, and European Union doesn't, Poland doesn't want to help these people, and European Union agrees with Poland, and they don't want to help these people. They don't want to let them into the country. Most of Polish society agrees with Polish government, and so this, and but on the other hand, I think that my poetry is also talking about these kind of things in the way, because my poetry and my art is talking about very edgy, drastic, dramatic situation. And when I'm talking about past, I hope so. I'm not only talking about past, but also about the present tragic situation. So maybe I hope so that I also may make some comment. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think one thing that perhaps Grzegorz, would you like to explain? You mentioned the situation on the Polish-Belarusian border, and maybe you can say a little bit more about what you mean by who are these people who are trying to to enter Poland.
It's Polish and Belarus border. These are people from Iraq. So Vladimir Putin and Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, they are taking these people from Iraq and they to Belarus, and they are lying to them that in very easy way they can go through Polish border, for example, to Germany, and then when they are on the territory of Belarus, they found out that they are in one big trap, and they can't go inside, and they are they are the whole families with little children. They are in forest, and there is colder and colder, and the weather is so and people are dying in this forest, and there are many thousands, more and more every day of these people. So of course this is a cynical plan made by Putin and Lukashenko, but the point is why the Christian nation as Poland and European Union built on Christian values doesn't want to help people who can die and are dying, so and people even support them in the way that they say, yeah, we are making good thing that this border is closed. So this is kind of a moral paralysis. It's very shocking. It's very sad, and of course there are some. I have to say about it, and I'm proud of it. I've got friends who are who are there now, and they are helping, and they are taking care. There are many people in Poland who are trying to give a food and clothes, and they're protesting, and they are fighting in peaceful way, of course. But most of society thinks that these families shouldn't be allowed to go to Poland, and yeah.
So this also really, what you've been just saying, really relates to the issue of memory, responsibility, denial, self-denial, and this is reality. This is the reality in which people live. What you just described, right? These are their lives, and I want to kind of loop it back into what you're doing and to your songs and your poems, and they encourage introspection into these issues, into these notions of memory, responsibility, denial, right? And one of your songs that you mentioned, never forget or never again.
Yeah.
Right, and here we have a situation with refugees on the Polish-Belarusian border, and it's about never again, right? Never again for whom? And so can you say a little bit more about what this injunction of never again means to you? And why do you think it was important to highlight it create a song about it? And a related question that you may want to address is, do you find this slogan problematic in any way? Because we tend to use it often, right? About never again, right? In different contexts, about a Holocaust memory, a call to never forget, to always remember, and so on. But what does that really mean?
It's never forget. Never forget. But it's as I said earlier, it's inspired by Shoah documentary movie by great director Claude Lanzmann, but the lyrics are very simple. It's kind of, we never forget humiliation. We never forget those ghetto deaths. And then they sound like a midnight choir, something like that. So one thing is a power of protest and protesting against evil forces, but of course, I think that we should have a memory about victims. And we have to remember them. It's very simple, obvious, but maybe it's not simple and not obvious. But it's not only the point of utilitarianism, but I think it's not nice to not remember it and taking care of memory of anyway of dead people, but especially of victims brutally murdered and defeated. So for me it's like my life this is my life in the way that I'm really very focused on this genocide problem and evil problem. When I was a child, I went to the concentration camp with my grandfather, and he was there first time after the war, and he was crying and shouting and reconstructing these situations. And I was a child, so for me it was very shocking. And so and I don't know, maybe I was 9 years old, but for me it was the first. It produced in my head first ethical questions, and till now I've got same questions, maybe not questions, but I just know that you shouldn't make harm to another person. You shouldn't, maybe it's so simple. I don't know, but if someone is suffering, you should help him. But my methodology is also in my writing stuff is mostly writing about voices from the past, about ghosts, because I'm using Edgar Lee Masters' methodology and his great masterpiece Spoon River anthology. So I took his methodology to speak about Polish ghosts and about Jewish ghosts and about Rwanda ghosts, because there are many different ghosts really, but their fate was really in some way sometimes was unfortunately similar. I mean victims, and so I'm talking about this thing in my poetry, in part of Trupa music. And for me, it's just it's my life, and but important thing is that I'm really, I guess so, but I know that few people knows me a bit. For example, David Kramer, who is here. Hello, David. So I think I'm rather cheerful, optimistic person, and it's not that I'm every day crying and I'm depressed by this tragic stuff. Of course, this is shocking stuff, and I'm still inside of it. But I think I've got ability to make a mix of this darkness and of some optimistic values, and I really think that by focusing on this dark historical, for example, stuff, we can produce more light. And for me, the biggest knowledge is that we are potentially, that every one of us has got an evil, that this is a human ability to kill, to murder, and we should always begin with ourselves. Every morning when I'm waking up, I'm really thinking about what I did bad yesterday, and maybe like a little child, that I did wrong this thing and this thing and this thing. So today I have to be better in this way and this way. It's maybe it's so easy, but the point is that I'm really trying not to lie. I really don't like to lie, and I think the lying is the beginning of the process of going into darker and darker states. and then after all, you don't see the realities, and then you're lost in some way. So maybe it's very easy, or maybe I'm wrong and very naive. I don't know.
Well, everything that you just talked about, I can ask I have so many questions, and there are so many themes that we could really dissect and continue discussing for hours. And two of those things that really stood out to me, what you just talked about, is this trope of ghosts, right? The ghost haunting Poland, and this trope is a very very popular in Polish literature. But also in Polish pop culture, and there's a new film, Polish film that came out. It's called The Wedding, Wesele in Polish, and it also is about those ghosts haunting a family, a community, and by extension a nation, right? And those are the ghosts of the past. And you speak a lot about memory commemoration, and of course today we are commemorating the November pogrom, the violence perpetrated against Jews in Greater Germany, and we all know this; these are facts, right? And we commemorate them, and we commemorate this history every year. But at the same time, there is a major issue that we are facing globally, and that is Holocaust distortion. In what ways do you think that poetry and music can counter this really disturbing global trend?
Yeah, I think that but I think that's just by singing, speaking, and not being afraid of saying the truth as many times as you can to as big audience as you can, and you can do it round and round and round, and not giving up. It's maybe so easy, and yeah, but I think that also some I really believe in facts. Of course, I believe in many perspectives. It's not that I believe in the individual perspectives on things, but I believe strongly in facts and in historical facts. And we've got this song called "Remainder," and the lyrics are, "Well, it did not take place. It did not take place," and we are singing it all around non-stop. This sentence, but of course, it means that it took place. It did take place. We want to make opposite effect. This is very, it's very frightening process. It's very more and more people are believing in fake news, and they are using it, for example, to fight with memory of Holocaust. Yeah, it's the problem is that. For example, Facebook, these things we know actually right now about Facebook. Maybe some of us knew about it earlier, but that this big technology doesn't help us. It may make things worse actually, and this is a big accelerator for hate, and it should change as soon as possible. So this is, but once we know it, I think we are on a good way to stop it. But I think that this kind of meeting is a great example of art of protest against this bad mechanism you mentioned.
So it really is about raising awareness and having that awareness and educating ourselves and educating others, and not being afraid to speak up when we see injustices and when we see falsities. That's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying, but I would also be very delicate in the way. How do you speak? In what way are you speaking? About the way of communication, the way that if you want to take someone on your side, you have to help him. It's not easy to take someone from the opposite side on your side. It's super hard. It's almost impossible, but sometimes it happens. But if you will say that someone is fucking stupid, etc., you know what I mean? that's the end of the conversation, you know. And he won, actually, you know, that or not he or she, but the evil won, because so of course I'm not the smart one. I've got also this kind of problems, and sometimes when I argue with someone, I'm angry. I'm just angry, and I can't listen to some bullshit stuff, you know. But I try to be as nice as I can to, you know, to. And for example, in Poland, you know, Poland is, for example, I knew the people which I knew 5 years ago, and 5 years ago I talked with some people about, for example, Jedwabne and about this pogrom, and they of course they knew who did that, and the Polish neighbors killed their Jewish neighbors. And 5 years later, they say, oh, I don't think so. You know what I mean? It's not so easy. So then I'm angry in a way. You know, what changed in 5 years? You know, what happened? You know, but something happened. Someone took their soul in some way. Of course, the cynical politicians took their soul. So this is in some way battle for people, for souls of people. But I think we should be very delicate and open-hearted and open-minded to win this battle, because we will not win it with a force.
So I think you know, what you're saying also kind of leads me into the last question before we open up the floor, the Zoom floor, to questions from our audience. And that is about responses, and that's very interesting what you said about, you know, how do we respond in discussions, right, to statements that you know are contrary to facts, that distort the facts, that we don't agree with, right? So it's about responses, and so of course there's a lot of positivity that you've encountered, right? Positive responses to your work, but I wonder about any negative responses to what you're doing, and if so, how do you respond to that? I also want to acknowledge that among our audience are educators, our students, our activists, and so what kind of strategies do you recommend to confront Holocaust denial and distortion, and to instill more awareness and understanding of historical injustices?
Well, I think that very usually I had maybe not advices, but for example, in literary world in Poland, there was a debate kind of 1 year ago or 2 years ago now. One of the critics said that you can't speak in the way you're speaking. You just can't write in this way. In the sense, so this person just wrote about it in some censorship way, that it's one big moral scandal that someone is speaking about ghosts from the past. But it's, of course, it made me sad in the way, but then I think, all right, I'm open and critic, but I'm always, when I am when I've got a feeling that someone is not nice in the way that someone is accusing, for example, about such, in my opinion, absurdity things, I'm just running faster. You know what I mean? That I'm not giving up. I'm just working harder, running faster. I'm more optimistic. It only works like a fuel to the machine. So every problem I had in my life, after all, was in some way successful. These problems were successful, but of course we should be open and critic. And it's not that someone is criticizing you and you're and you don't care. But I think for example, in Poland, I always heard that you shouldn't write in your poetry about historical stuff. You shouldn't do it. Poetry shouldn't deal with history, especially when you are so young, because you are so young that you don't have a mandate. You don't have a right to write about the past. That's all. So please shut up in some way. And I had really kind of 20 this kind of advice, or 30 this kind of advices, and I didn't, because I thought, all right, I think that I'm doing right thing through history of my family, through tragic history of my wife's family, because my wife's family is a Jewish family. It's all very complicated, but I'm as true as I can be, and of course I'm open and critic. And what I can do is to communicate in better way, to work harder, and to run faster.
Thank you, Grzegorz. And now I would like to open our discussion to all of you in our audience today. You may unmute and ask your question, or you may pose. I see we don't have the Q&A function, but we do have the chat. We do have the chat, which I've been using. So please post your questions in the chat, or if you feel more comfortable, you may unmute and ask your question of Grzegorz.
Okay, I had a question. Hello. How does your music break down barriers among those who are Holocaust minimizers or deniers, and those who recognize and commemorate the horrors of the Holocaust? How does your music in any way break down those barriers?
It's hard question, because I don't know if I know in a way. I don't know if someone who was on the radical right wing changed because of this music. I don't know. I hope so, but I didn't have this kind of a feedback in a way. Thank you for changing me. I rather think that for us it's so obvious. And for me it's so obvious that it's like rather a vaccine for future lives. You know what I mean? That it works as a vaccination. That someone who is listening to that and in the future would hear some fake stories would know that this is not true, for example. But I don't know, and I don't know if I gave you an answer.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, thank you.
I see Bruce.
Excuse me. Hi, good afternoon.
Hello.
In 2019, I had the opportunity to go on the March of Living with an adult group to Poland. And it was quite an emotional experience for me. We were fortunate that we had a woman in our bus named, I don't remember her last name, Maud, who was from New Jersey, who was very instrumental in getting Holocaust education in New Jersey. So my question really is, art and music are very important tools, but they're just a tool. And now under the present regime in Poland, which is not very pro-Jewish thoughts, are there any other tools that are being used to try to work to bring more awareness to the population, whether under this regime, because they're trying to rewrite Jewish history?
Yeah, it's. I don't know if I understand you properly, so I will try to tell you what I understand. So you are asking me if there is more art which is protesting against fake versions of history, right? Or
well, you
have
you have a very small Jewish population in Poland.
Yes.
And political regime is not in your favor. So besides art or music, are you aware of any other forms of regrouping of the existing Jewish population that may be trying to reinvigorate or refight what is being thrown down their neck right now, or their throat?
I can't give you an answer because I don't know. I just can say you that Poland is very anti-Semitic country. Unfortunately, not only on right wing, but also on left wing. I think this is, but the left wing wouldn't say you about it loudly, and this is very. For example, my wife's family, her grandmother was hiding near the city of Rzeszów during the Second World War. And when I asked her, "Are you a Jewish?" She said she's not a Jewish, and she hates Jewish people, etc. You know what I mean? And so in some way, they are still afraid, to say that they are. So this is very, very, very. It also means that we've got a lot still work to do, and still, and because anyway, I stay optimistic, in the way that anyway, I think that we can work it out, and we can try, we can make things for better, not for worse. But there is a long way to go, and what I want to say is that the only problem is not new government. The problem is really bigger, and it's almost in every family. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's much more wider and darker, and yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question, if I may. Good afternoon. I'm from a Catholic University of Lublin, so I'm Polish myself, which is why this subject is extremely important for me. You use the term the third generation after Holocaust, and this is a term that I come across quite frequently and quite often in Polish literature connected to Holocaust. And my question is, what does it mean to you to be the third generation post-Holocaust? Do you feel like you carry the experience of Holocaust somewhere on your shoulders because of your grandfather's experience? Just basically, what does it mean to you?
I believe. Hello, and thank you for this question. I think the genetic memory is a proven thing. So I'm third generation, but I didn't say that I'm third generation of Holocaust, because my grandfather, family of my wife is a Jewish family. My grandfather was a Polish prisoner of a concentration camp, Stuttgart. So this is a third generation of trauma, third generation of concentration camp trauma and the war trauma. But I think this it's like I think that's it just exists. I don't know what to say more, in the way that you are taking traumas after your parents and grandparents, and you've got it, and the point is, what are you doing with it? How do you want to deal with that? And do you want to speak about it, or communicate about it, or be very sad or angry? There are many ways how to proceed it, and I think that I, in some unconscious way, but I've chosen a good way, which helps not only me, but I hope that also the others.
Thank you. And we have the last question from David.
Chris has been trying to message me and it wasn't coming through for a little while. We take two questions.
Okay, two questions. So David, you had your hand up, David Kramer. You raised your hand. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Grzegorz. It's so great to see you,
Yes.
and always to hear the thoughtfulness of what you have to say. One of the ways I think that your poetry and lyrics gain their power is through their shocking quality. They're very in your face. They can shock the listener. The music can be dissonant. All of these, I think, are very important qualities, because they force us to sit up and take notice. So I'm going to ask you to play with your artistic imagination. I don't know if this will be a good direction for you. if we could have captured the sound of the glass breaking in the synagogues and the Jewish shops those years ago and recorded that. So more glass breaking and more glass breaking and more glass breaking. Could that have become a piece of your art? Could you imagine that as a sound poem, as a song? I don't know where it would go, but how would you work with the emotion that comes with the shattering to create something that would force us to sit up and take notice?
Yeah, it's a very hard and great question, but yeah, what I think is fear, pure fear, but and I don't know what could I do with that, but the point is that it's really great question, because my poetry is not a pure imagination. That's a very important issue. You know, that a lot of this poetry, or most of this poetry, is based on the real voices of victims or perpetrators or observators. And so what I would do, I would really go deep inside the memories, real memories, and I would try to make some full of fear poem or song. But I think it's a great idea, so I will work on it. So thank you. But it's also great to say about the methodology. So it's not that it's my imagination that is, you know, because that is making science fiction stories about the past, and because I think it wouldn't be nice. But of course, art is still an open, free situation. But you know, we are talking about memory and about victims. These are very important issues. So we should be as we can be, as close to the facts as we can be. I think so. But you know, for example, Shoah by Claude Lanzmann. You know, Shoah by Claude Lanzmann is a movie when there was a great art of montage. You know, and that's all. You know, it's and the art is always art of montage. It's not. You know, but it's obvious. Thank you, dear David. This is a great idea.
Well, what you've told, I didn't mean that you would just imagine it, but you've told me that you would create a sound montage out of real, right, sounds, and that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
I very much like how this is a very thriving, lively discussion with so many questions that we have for Grzegorz. So this merits, you know, another meeting. And we have time for one last question from Chris, who's been patiently waiting to ask her question. So please, the floor is yours. Oh, you're muted, I think. Chris, you are muted.
Maybe you can write him in the Chris Bauer. Are we talking about?
Yes, we still cannot hear you. I'm sorry.
I wrote to him on chat, but I didn't.
Perfect. And, you know, I would say afterwards, if there is a question, Chris, perhaps you can email it, you know, to me in the follow-up, and we'll pass it on to Grzegorz and make sure it gets answered.
And there is last question. Maybe instead of Christoph, there is Mrs. Madeleine.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap up. I do apologize, and I need to give a moment.
Can I just make it really, really quick? And he can answer.
I actually have to leave the building. That's why.
Oh.
Yeah, that's why. But I want to give a moment to our co-presenter for tonight's program, my colleague, Jessica Goldsmith Barzilai, to just say a moment, and she's going to wrap the program up.
I really want to thank our speakers for coming out and have this conversation. Mm-hmm. I think it's fantastic that this conversation had so many people who who were not only interested to hear what you had to say, but who were interested to make comments of their own. I have to say that my father is a proud Danziger. So to hear these stories, and I've heard stories of Danzig, both from a perspective of the horrors, but also the beauty of the city as well. So to hear from another Danziger has been quite amazing for me. But truly, the fact that these stories continue, the Center for International Studies is co-sponsoring this because we think it's so important to talk about these perspectives from all over the world and have these conversations. So we're sorry we don't have time to hear everyone's comment and questions, but feel so positive and empowered that this many people wanted to come on in the middle of the afternoon and hear and share and experience this. And it's the stories that the Holocaust Resource Center keeps us sharing and keeps telling that really makes the difference and will make it the never again. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jessica. And, thank you, Grzegorz. Thank you, Joanna, for being with us this afternoon. What I will do is if there are people who still have any questions that they'd like to ask, Joanna, I will make you the host for the program, and that way you can remain on. Otherwise, thank you so very much for being here tonight. Our annual Scholar Lecture is going to be held on Wednesday, December 1st at 7 p.m. And this features both Joanna Sliwa and my doctoral advisor, Dr. Deborah Dwork, and we will share that information in our follow-up email tomorrow. But again, thank you so very much for being here. I am going, Joanna, to make you the host. And I do apologize, I need to sign off. But everyone have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adara.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Does that mean I can still ask my question or not?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'm just trying to be polite here. I not only teach high school social studies, I taught, I should say, because of COVID, high school social studies and English. And one of my favorites is Edgar Lee Masters. And I can't believe that Spoon River Anthology, while no longer, at least I teach in New York State. I know most people are probably from New Jersey, and I attend Kean in their master's Holocaust program. But that warmed my heart because he's no longer considered necessary for the Common Core in New York State. I don't know about New Jersey. And I could so identify with a lot of the symbols and connections to the Holocaust from just dealing with Spoon River Anthology, which I just, to this day, I still teach it as long as they let me.
Great. We are a great hero.
Yeah, I really, and by the way, I have relatives from both Hungary and Galicia when it was Bukovina, and it was Poland, and not, now I know it's Ukraine, who died in the Holocaust, and one or two that survived.
Yes.
And I also attended a seminar teaching the Holocaust down in Appalachian University. And they actually brought several teachers over from Poland. And these teachers were showing that they actually taught the Holocaust to their classes, took them to certain places. And I haven't been in touch with them in the past year. And I'm just wondering if what's going on now in Poland, if they can still do that, or if there's some problems. Because I mean, I know in Hungary, a lot of my connections are afraid to communicate on email.
I think that I think that there is no such censorship in Poland. So I don't think so. Yeah, but I think the biggest problem is that if someone is afraid, and if someone is afraid, then this is the big win of evil. So yeah, but I didn't know about Hungary. It's about the situation in Hungary. It's very tragic. Yeah, I know about problems in Hungary, but I didn't know about the Holocaust censorship in Hungary.
Were you aware there were teachers, though, in Poland that were actually teaching the Holocaust?
Yeah, there are a lot of teachers in Poland who are, yeah. Because, when I'm saying that a lot of that Poland is a very anti-Semitic country, I think it's really a very anti-Semitic country, but there are a lot of great people here and a lot of great heroes and a lot of great fighters and freedom fighters. And, it's not only black and white. Yeah.
It really influenced me about Poland, seeing these people, and seeing, hearing their stories and seeing them participating in this seminar.
Mm-hmm. I hope you will meet them one day, one after COVID. Will be difficult.
There are. I just have to jump in and say that there are some wonderful teachers in Poland who teach the Holocaust in their local schools, in smaller towns, in cities. They teach Jewish history to the extent that they can, incorporate it into the curriculum. And for teachers here, understand how hard that is to fit all that information in. There are exchange programs. Israeli students, for example, and students from the US come to Poland, spend time with their peers. So of course there are things happening, and there, in terms of censorship, it's not that teachers cannot teach the Holocaust. I think it has more to do with support. How much support do you have from your administrators and from the community, from parents, right, to teach. Students in Poland also go on site visits. They visit former sites of the former camps. They learn in some places about the Jewish history of their towns. They're involved in various projects of documentation and education. So there are many initiatives, and I think this is something that is very, very positive and very encouraging, that the next generation that grows up will perhaps have a different perspective than many today have, right? Yes, Shana.
Thank you. I'm Shauna. I'm also a social studies teacher in New Jersey, and I just wanted to kind of point out that this is exactly what's going on in America right now, that people are arguing about how we teach about our own ghosts. That's what this critical race theory, stuff is really about. People don't want us to look at our own ghosts of American past. And so it's not that different to me. When entire states like Texas are banning learning, they're actually writing down names of people that you can't teach about and stories you can't tell. So to me, it's all in this same idea. And what worries me is that it's almost like, I don't know if this will make sense, but the same pattern of what gets us into scapegoating to begin with as people, when we start to put blame elsewhere so that we don't look at ourselves, it's that same pattern that we're seeing with all of this denial all around. So how do we stop that pattern? There's not like an answer. I guess we all do it, like through our art, through our teaching, through our conversations. But to me, that's the concern, is that it's that same pattern. We're still deflecting blame, trying to explain things that are difficult to understand with easy answers. That's what got people into that behavior to begin with when we're talking about fascism. And anyway, so I just wanted to point out that it's not that different than what we're dealing with right here. And thank you.
I'm sorry to hear about it, but I think that it's got this kind of a polarization and this. I just think that it's got a lot of to do with social medias. That with the algorithm of Facebook, etc., that it really changed minds of people in a real big way for worse. And so it's not. hypothesis. This is the fact. So I think it should change as soon as possible, because it will have it's already have tragic impact, especially in the United States, So it's very shocking that one company could make such big moral horror read for whole of the world read. So it's shocking. So I hope that the nation will control them in some way, more or less. But still, this kind of thing can be out of control.
I think, Shauna, you mentioned, you raised a very important point about how universal this is. And, we here in this session, we focus on Poland and the situation in Poland, but we also have to realize what's happening here in our own backyard, in the States. And Grzegorz, of course, social media, right? There are so many problems with it, and we are all very aware of it, and it's disturbing and frightening. But I think there is also some potential to use that social media, to harness it for our purposes of education and raising awareness. And here I do want to mention, I work at the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, the Claims Conference, and we do recognize at our organization the need for education, and we do that also through social media. So we have this campaign, it's hashtag It Started With Words. We also have, it's on Twitter, it's on Facebook, and we also have a website with resources for educators, but also for just regular people, ordinary people who want to learn about, what does it mean it started with words, before the violence, before Kristallnacht, the November pogrom, right? With the banners, the chants, the signs, the hateful speech, and so on. So I think it's really up to us, and to teach our students too how to use social media in a wise way to educate. Okay, does anyone else have other questions? Because I love this discussion that we're having. I would love for us all to meet one day, in person and continue this exchange. It's been a real honor and pleasure to discuss these things.
Can you list the website in the chat that you just talked about?
Yes.
Thanks.
We want to thank our, look at this. People don't even want to leave. There's so much conversation. So we absolutely want to thank everyone for hanging in there, and thank our speakers for hanging in there and being willing to continue the conversation. I think it's like you said, Joanna, that it means there's more conversation to be had.
Thank you. Absolutely. I'm super thankful to you, Joanna, and to Adara, but especially to you as a guest, because it's always like that, in my opinion, from my perspective, that the guests are creating the atmosphere, especially when we can see each other. Because if we can't see each other, these meetings are, in my opinion, rather flat. But it was amazing experience, and you gave great spiritual power to this moral event. So I'm really happy that you invited me, and that you are here. You are here, and I hope to see you next time, or in live situation, or in Zoom situation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So Jessica, shall we end?
Yes, and you made this anything but flat. So if there's no other questions, last chance for a raise of a hand, or most people don't have their camera on, but or a last question. And otherwise, with great thanks for continuing to tell these stories and have these important conversations. We wish everybody a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.